Well, as you are grabbing a seat, if you would like a Bible, there's one in the foyer. You can. Those are there for you to borrow, or if you would like a Bible, you could keep those. But if you have a copy of the Scriptures, we are in this morning. I'll be reading in just a moment from the book of Genesis, the first book of the Bible, chapter 28. We've been in this little mini-series entitled Sacramental Living, and we've been looking over for the past couple weeks on the sacraments of the church. The first week we looked at the sacrament of communion, and last week we looked at the sacrament of baptism. And we're just wrapping up this. It's a short little mini-series because next week is the beginning of Advent. But as we wrap up today, we're going to be looking at what it means for us to live sacramentally. So what do I mean by that? Well, the sacraments can be defined in many ways. I think one useful way that the sacraments can be defined is that the sacraments is when God's invisible grace meets us in tangible ways. God's invisible grace meeting us in tangible ways. So in the sacrament of communion, we have, whenever we take communion in faith, we meet the invisible grace of God in the very tangible cup, in the very tangible bread. When we receive baptism in faith, we receive the invisible grace of God in the very tangible baptismal waters. And so these are the capital S sacraments of the church. But what about kind of the lowercase s sacraments? What would it mean for us to meet the invisible grace of God, not only in the elements of communion, not only in the baptismal waters, but what if we met His invisible grace in our day-to-day lives, in the mundane activities, in work, in life, in chores, and in everything that we do? And so this is our sacramental vision. I want to offer this sacramental vision that I would hope that we would grab onto this morning. And it's simply that the vision of living sacramentally means to live in such a way as seeing all of life as sacred spaces to encounter God. This is the vision I want us to try to grasp this morning, is seeing all of life as sacred spaces to encounter God. And as we begin this morning, I'm going to be looking at a story in the book of Genesis, starting in verse 10. This is a story about the patriarch Jacob, who later becomes Israel. In verse 10, it tells us this: "Hear the word of the Lord. Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran. He came to a certain place and stayed there for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place. And he dreamed that there was a ladder set up on the earth, the top of it reaching to heaven, and angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And the Lord stood beside him, and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, I will give to you and your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And all the families of the earth shall be blessed in you and in your offspring. Know that I am with you and will keep you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you." Then Jacob woke from his sleep and said, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it." This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Our oldest son, Eli, and we oftentimes play hide and seek, Right? It's a game that we like to do, and we've gotten pretty good at it. And I just to brag a little bit, I would say I'm pretty good at hiding. And sometimes I hide so well that he has a hard time finding me. And if you've ever played hide and seek with a child, you know that the goal is not to stay hidden, in a cramped closet for hours on end, right? That's not the ideal. You want to be found at some point, right? You don't want to stay cramped up in that small space forever. And so if I'm hiding and it's taking Eli a while to find me, then I might do something to help him, right? I might make an animal noise, or I might move and make a ruckus, or I might stick out my foot from where I'm hiding, or do something to where he'll be able to find me, because he's learned some of my tricks. I'm so good at hiding that sometimes I'll even I'll hide behind a curtain one time, and he'll have a hard time finding me. But then the next time, I'll take off my shoes and put them underneath the curtain as if I'm hiding there, and then I'll go hide somewhere else. And so sometimes it's really hard to find me. And he's gotten really good at hiding too, and there are times where I'm frustrated and I can't find him, and so he'll do something to make it easier for me to find him. But this idea of hide and seek, where we want to hide, but we don't want to hide so well that the other person can't find us, right? We want to hide just enough to where they have to search for us. But we don't want to have to hide so well that they never find us. Part of the nature of God is that he is a hidden God. He hides just enough so that we have to search for him, but not so much that we can never find him. He reveals just enough that he is always found by those who seek. Through Jeremiah, God tells his people that if they seek him with their whole hearts, they will find him. Jeremiah 29:13. The scriptures tell us that he is an invisible God. Romans 1 tells us that he is his invisible attributes, his eternal power, his divine nature. They are invisible, but they are also revealed. Revealed through creation. The greatest revelation, of course, of our invisible, hidden God is the revelation of Jesus Christ. God incarnate, God in the flesh among us. So we find God most clearly in the person of Jesus. Paul tells us in Colossians 1 that he is the image of the invisible God. We find God in the person of Jesus. We find God in the sacraments that Jesus left for us. We find him in the cup. We find him in the bread. We find him in the water. But we also find God in the everyday sacramental spaces. The everyday spaces of life and creation. For God is not far from us. He may be hidden, but he is near. In the book of Acts, we find this scene where Paul, he's converted now, and he's preaching in Athens, Greece. And he's up on this hill, Mars Hill, just down from the Parthenon, and he's giving this argument for God. And he's teaching about who this God is that he worships. And in this talk, he tells us this in Acts 17. He tells this to those in Athens. He says, from one ancestor, God made all nations to inhabit the whole earth. And he allotted the times of their existence and the boundaries of their places where they should live, so that they would search for God and perhaps grope for him and find him, though indeed he is not far from each one of us. He has set this all up so that we would find him, that we would search for him, that we would look for him. But here's the big secret. Here's the big giveaway. He's not far from each one of us. He is near. But though God is present, even though God is near and can be found, if we look a little bit, the truth is we often miss him. And this is the story of Jacob in Genesis chapter 28. Right? A little bit of a backstory. Jacob, if you don't know much about him, he's a bit of a scoundrel. Right? We have the patriarch of Jacob. Later he becomes Israel. He's the father of the 12 tribes. But when we look at his life, we find that he was a scoundrel. Right? His name means deceiver, and that's exactly what he was. He was a deceiver. He has a twin brother named Esau, and Esau was a little bit older, and so because Esau was born first and has he has a birthright. Because he's born first, he gets the blessings of his father to kind of keep the blessings of God continuing down the line. But Jacob kind of manipulates his brother in a time of hunger and a time of need, and he gets his brother to sell him his birthright for a bowl of soup, right? You know that story? Later, when his father, Isaac, is on his deathbed and he's blind and can't see, he tricks his father to give him the blessing instead of his brother Esau, right? So there's a lot of tension in this family. There's lots of division in this family. Jacob's mother favored him, but Isaac favored Esau. So there's favoritism in the family. They're fighting against each other. They're manipulating each other, and Jacob is in the middle of it, being this manipulator and deceiver to the point where his brother Esau now hates him so much that he wants to kill him. And this isn't just like a sibling, wow, I'm having a hard time with that word. Sibling rivalry, where it's like, oh man, I'm going to kill you. No, Esau is actually going to kill his brother Jacob. Like, it is not good. And so Jacob has to flee. He leaves his home, he leaves his family, and he's on the road. He's going towards his uncle Laban's place, which will also be marked with deceit and all sorts of things. But here in this time, he's on the road and he stops, just like you would on a road trip or something. He's in the middle of nowhere. He finds a rock and he says, this is a good enough place to sleep as any. He puffs up the rock, uses it as a pillow, and he sleeps, not realizing that God was in that place. And God reveals to him this vision and this dream. This what we call Jacob's ladder. It's not Jacob's ladder, right? It's God's ladder. But he sees this ladder of the angels going up and down from heaven to earth. And God is there. And this is the place that God is going to bring his descendants and give to them as inheritance. Later, when he wakes up, he realizes God is there. He builds an altar, and he names the place Bethel, house of God. But he was there. God was in that place, and he didn't know it. There was nothing special about the place. If you looked at the place, you wouldn't think, oh, this is a holy place. This is a special place. Certainly, God must be in this place. It was just some random place along the way. And that is where he met the grace of God. I read an interesting statistic about the book of Acts. And it's this, that 39 out of the 40 miracles in the book of Acts take place outside of the walls of the church. Think about that for a moment. The book of Acts, which is the Acts of the Apostles, it's the Acts of the early church. And 39 out of the 40 miracles in the book of Acts take place outside of the walls of the church. Out there, on the streets, in the day-to-day lives of the coming and goings. That's where God's miraculous activity is by far taking place. To live sacramentally is to be on the lookout for the presence of God in our midst. Not just here at church, not just when we're at the Lord's table, not just in the sacrament of baptism, but living sacramentally is to encounter his invisible grace in tangible ways out there. Every day, Monday through Sunday. And yes, we meet him here again, but then Sunday afternoon and Monday morning when we get up, the grace of God does not sit in church all week long. We believe in a God that is alive and active, and he is active out there every day, and we are invited to engage and receive and participate in his grace in the everyday sacraments of life. So I want to offer a few lowercase sacraments that we might engage in and meet God in our daily lives. I think of the sacrament of cleaning, doing chores, and how if we adjust our thinking a little bit, if we adjust our posture a little bit, we can engage in the activity of washing dishes in a sacramental way, where we can experience the grace of God even as we're folding laundry, cleaning up the house. And let me offer maybe a few ways where this can be practically done, right? And just like in the sacraments of communion, just like in the sacraments of baptism, we must not do these lowercase sacraments mindlessly, like maybe we're used to. We don't take communion mindlessly, but we take it intentionally with our eyes open, with an awareness of the presence of the Spirit of God. So I would encourage you, when you're washing dishes, take each fork and be intentional, like notice the fork. Maybe think about who was using this dish, how even the use of that dish had been a blessing for that person. Maybe it was a blessing for you to eat off this plate, to drink out of this cup. Think of the hands that used it, and now you're washing it to be able to be used again, to be able to be a means for someone to get food into their bodies once more. This can be a sacrament. This can be holy work. Simply washing dishes, simply folding laundry. Take each piece of clothing and notice it. Make that activity the most important activity. Right? Whatever it is, whether you're washing dishes or folding clothes or picking up the house, that is the most important thing that you are doing. There's nothing more important than that for that moment right then. And you can pay attention to each object without distraction. You can be aware of the presence of God that is with you and how your activities, the activities of your body and your mind and your spirit is being used by God to bring life, to bring order out of chaos. If you've ever been a parent of small children, you know that picking up is all about bringing order to the never-ending chaos. And that is holy work. That's the work of God, who at the beginning spoke into the chaos of the waters and calmed the chaotic waters, right? This is holy work that we're doing. Tidying up, cleaning things. I think of the sacrament of parenting, changing diapers, taking care of kids when they're sick, bringing them up in such a way that they too know the presence of God. This is sacramental work that we're doing. I think of the sacrament of work, paid work, going into an office, having whatever job you have or have had, that we have a sacrament of work, and we have a sacrament of paid work, and we have a sacrament of unpaid work, volunteer work, or other types of work. And each of these, if we take whatever we're doing and we hold it in our hands or whatever it is, and we're like, this is the most important thing, and we pay attention to it, your eyes will be open. You'll be able to see and experience the grace of God and the very tangible realities of your work, paid or unpaid. How your work can be a means by which prayers are answered. That's God's vision for our work. Whether you realize it or not, someone is dependent upon your work being done. And that can make their life either a whole lot easier or a whole lot more difficult. And the work that you do can be the answer to someone's prayer. A spoken prayer, a conscious prayer, or an unspoken prayer, an unconscious prayer. Your work can be done to fulfill God's prayer requests. It's holy, sacramental work. So we can look at these things, chores and work and parenting. We can view them as either obstacles that get in the way of encountering God. Like, I just got to get through my work day, and then I can have a quiet time, and then I'll be with God. I just got to put the kids to bed, and then I'll be able to have a moment alone with God. I just have to get these chores done. I just got to get the dishes done. I just have to do this laundry, and then I'll be able to finally get to God. We can view them as obstacles to God, or we can view them as the means by which we can encounter the grace of God. And suddenly, your life opens up. Suddenly, you have so much more time with God. Because every moment becomes a moment of His grace. I think of the sacrament of art. I know there are some artists here, maybe there's some artists who have not practiced art in a while, some who have, but your art, the means that which you make art, is a means by which we can encounter the tangible grace of God. And the brushstrokes and the writings and the drawings, whatever it is, that we can meet God in the act of creating art, because our God is an artist. He creates for us all the time. He paints new sunsets and sunrises. Not even every day, but think about this for a moment. This is something I think about quite often. There is always a sunset taking place. There is always a sunrise taking place. It's not that He paints one sunrise every day and one sunset every day. He is always making a sunset and a sunrise every single moment of every single day. And it's always new. It's always different. It's always unique. And it's always beautiful. That is the creative. That's just a small little slice of the creativity of God. And so us in our creative arts, we can tap into that sacrament and experience God's grace. I think of the sacraments of plants. Some people like gardening. Some people just like looking at plants. We can engage and meet the invisible grace of God in the very physical nature of leaves, flowers, trees, grass, just any part of of nature or plants. God's grace is there. The sacrament of relationships. Seeing people. Being with them, looking into their eyes and knowing, getting in touch that every single person bears the image of God. So when you see them, when you truly see all of them, you see them and you glimpse God. That is a grace. That is a gift that we can meet the invisible God in the eyes and the face of every person we come across. But again, this takes intentionality. It's not just going from person to person in your everyday life and just kind of going on autopilot. Hey, how you doing? I'm doing fine. How are you doing? And then just move on, right? But engaging in every person as a unique moment to meet the invisible grace of God that they carry inherently because they bear that image, because you bear that image, and you can give that gift to others. You can be a sacramental space where people can meet God. The Lord is in this place. But I did not know it, Jacob said. Living sacramentally is to move from learning about it after the fact to seeing God in the present moment. To be able to say, God was in this here, he was in this place, and I knew it. He was here with me, and I was there with him. He was speaking, and I could hear. He was in the eyes of that person. He was in the tears of that person crying, and I met God in that moment, and I was aware of it. Living sacramentally is to make that shift. So often, I think we miss out because we rely on retrospect. It might be after the fact we're reflecting or thinking about it, and we look back and go, oh, God was in that place. God was in that conversation I had, and I didn't even know it. God was in the art that I was creating, and I didn't even realize it till weeks later. God was in the chores I was doing, and I didn't see it. Maybe I never saw it. Too often, we think God was in that place, but we didn't realize it. I think of Psalm 23. It's a psalm I recite often, but it's what strikes me about when he gets to the part where he says, as I walked there, although I walked through the valley of the shadow of death, you were with me. And I get the sense that it wasn't after the fact he realized this. Although I walked through the valley of the shadow of death, I didn't know you were there, but you were there. He's saying, although I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. He is aware of God's presence and his comfort, even in the valley of the shadow of death. So don't let it be a retrospective thing. Don't walk through the valley of the shadow of death and then years later look back and go, oh, God was there. Even as you're walking through the valleys of the shadow of death, know God is with you. His rod and his staff, let them comfort you. Be attuned to his presence. And the key to all of this, I think, is for us to be people of prayer, to be contemplatives, to have God on our mind always. I think this is what Paul means when he says to pray without ceasing. Doesn't mean to be talking constantly to God. That would just be annoying. Maybe it would annoy me if someone was just talking to me constantly, but to be with him constantly. Be talking with him sometimes, be listening to him sometimes, or just be sitting with him. Whatever you're doing, just spending your time with him as you're folding laundry. Fold laundry with God. As you're washing dishes, wash dishes with God. As you're working or painting or gardening or talking with people. This is something that we have to learn. These are skills that we learn, that it takes time. But as we do so, we begin to have more capacity to see God everywhere. To be able to spend time with him everywhere. We see him in the dishes and in the office and in the diaper changing, believe it or not, and in the strokes of the paintbrush and the leaves and the eyes of others. And we can see and we can meet God's grace in these everyday moments. But listen, the Bible is full of stories of God coming to people, and they missed it. Right? One example I think of is Balaam and the story of Balaam's donkey, right? And Balaam's on his donkey going down the road, and he's gonna do something that God doesn't want him to do. And God sends an angel to block his way. And the donkey moves to the one side, and Balaam hits his donkey, and then the donkey moves. The donkey can see the angel. Balaam hasn't noticed the angel. And so the donkey moves to the other side, and Balaam hits him, and finally Balaam has had enough. He wants to kill his donkey until finally the donkey opens his mouth and speaks. It says, "Why are you hitting me? Have I not been a faithful donkey all these years? Don't you think there's a reason why I'm going from one side to the other?" And then Balaam's like, "Yeah, I guess, yeah, that makes sense." And then Balaam's eyes are open, and he saw the angel. And he says, I did not know that you were there. We have Jacob who is there in the house of God, and he did not know that God was there. And there's no more tragic of an example than when God came to his people in the flesh. God incarnate, which we're about to celebrate here next month. We're going to begin celebrating in Advent next week. Where God came to his people not invisibly, but came to them visibly, came to them clearly. And probably one of the most tragic verses of the Bible is in John 1:11, where it says that he came to his own, and his own did not accept him. He came to his own, and his own did not recognize him. May we move from saying that God was in this place and we did not know it, to a place where we can say, man, God is in this place, and I knew it. He came here and he met with me, and I could see him clearly. He spoke, and I was listening. He was in the face of that person, and I was attuned to God's Spirit there. Our life opens up when we can live sacramentally, seeing every space as holy, every time as sacred. And this is God's invitation for each one of us. He may be hidden, but he is not far. He requires you to seek a little bit, to have your eyes open a little bit, to be listening for the jostling. Hey, I'm over here. And as you hear those cues, as you search him out, he said that you will find me. And the truth is, he's not far. Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, we are so thankful that you are the God that is near to us. That though you are hidden, you have made yourself known. You have revealed yourself through creation. You have revealed yourself through work, through others, through Scripture, through your Son Jesus. So God, we ask that you would give us a heart that is set on finding you in the everyday, set on seeking you out in every moment. In every activity, may we look for your grace and may we meet you there. May nothing be an obstacle for us. But instead, we ask that you would reshape it. Our work, our chores, our relationships. Reshape all of those things so that they can be a means by which we meet your grace in tangible ways, so that the will of you who is in heaven will be accomplished here on earth through us by your grace and in the name of your Son Jesus. Amen.